It was supposed to be paradise. Quiet cul-de-sac, trimmed hedges, golden retrievers with bandanas, and neighbors who smiled through gritted teeth as they took out their trash. I moved here for peace, for the kind of suburban calm you see in detergent commercials. Little did I know, I was stepping into the most passive-aggressive battlefield in America, my neighborhood's HOA jurisdiction, and leading this tyrannical regime was a woman known only as Karen. Not a Karen, the Karen. At first, it was charming. The mailboxes matched. The lawns looked cloned. Every Tuesday, the air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and pettiness. I thought, this is what adulthood is supposed to feel like. I bought a porch swing. I waved to Mr. Thompson and his yappy Pomeranian. I even went to the HOA welcome brunch, where Karen gave me a binder thick enough to qualify as an ancient religious text. Rules ensure harmony, she smiled, each word sharpened like a knife. We keep the neighborhood safe, beautiful, predictable. I nodded. I was naive. It started with my curtains. Beige, I was told, was too bold. Then my mailbox was 2 inches too tall. Then a warning for having excessively emotional wind chimes. I laughed the first time, laughed a little less the second. By the third notice, I realized Karen wasn't running an HOA. She was orchestrating a symphony of suburban oppression. She patrolled the sidewalks like a hawk in pastel polo shirts, armed with a clipboard and a digital camera. She didn't knock. She materialized. Still, I tried to play nice, until the day I decided I wanted a pool. Nothing fancy. Just a small above-ground setup where I could float on weekends, margarita in hand, contemplating cloud shapes. I filled out the paperwork, dotted every I, crossed every T, and handed it in with a hopeful smile. A week later, I received my answer. In capital letters, red ink, and a tone that dripped with smug satisfaction, it read, "Denied. Pools are not in harmony with the neighborhood's aesthetic unity." I stood in my backyard, holding that notice, listening to a distant sprinkler click rhythmically, like a ticking time bomb. That's when I knew. I had underestimated her. Karen wasn't just anti-pool. She was anti-joy, anti-spontaneity, anti-anything that didn't look like it belonged in a brochure for artificial living. But here's the thing about people like me. We might seem easygoing. We mow our lawns. We host decent BBQs. But when you push us, when you poke at our patients one HOA notice at a time, something inside shifts. I didn't want a war. I wanted a pool. But now I wanted something much, much better, and Karen had no idea what was coming. The day after my pool request was denied, Karen strutted down the sidewalk like she had personally vanquished a dragon. Her visor tilted just so, clipboard in hand. She paused in front of my mailbox and scribbled something before sauntering away. I didn't even need to check. I already knew it was another infraction, probably for the rebellious angle of my garden gnome's hat or the fact that my tulips dared to grow unevenly. It was all part of the performance, the spectacle. Karen loved reminding people who held the power, and she wielded that HOA charter like it was the Constitution itself. I tried reasoning with her once. I caught her mid-lap around the neighborhood and gently asked what, exactly, was so offensive about a small above-ground pool in a fenced backyard. She smiled like she'd been waiting for this moment. Pools lead to noise, she explained, to chaos. Next thing you know, people are installing trampolines and painting their doors red. It's a slippery slope. She said it like pools were gateway drugs to anarchy. So I tried alternatives. A small water feature? Denied. A hot tub with a cover? Denied. Even a kiddie pool for my nephew, plastic, barely knee-deep, was flagged as a potential violation of visual tranquility. Karen seemed to gain strength with each no. Her lips curled with satisfaction every time she handed me another rejection, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the form like a gavel. The rest of the neighborhood just watched. No one dared speak up. Karen's reign wasn't about rules, it was about control. What she didn't know was that I wasn't giving up. I started reading. The HOA bylaws were available online. Hundreds of pages of contradictions, loopholes, and outdated language that hadn't been revised since fax machines were considered cutting edge. Night after night, I sat at my kitchen table with a highlighter and a notepad, flipping through the sacred texts of suburban law. And that's when I found it. Buried deep in a subsection titled Decorative Landscaping Features, there it was. A vague paragraph that allowed for water-based ornamental installations that promote tranquility and do not exceed specified safety parameters. No mention of the word pool, no guidelines on shape, depth, or medieval inspiration. My fingers trembled, my heart raced. Karen had closed every door she could, but she'd left one window wide open. The next morning, I submitted no paperwork. I didn't ask for permission. I simply marked a rectangle around my backyard with spray paint and ordered the excavation equipment. Karen showed up an hour later, her expression a mix of confusion and suspicion. "What exactly are you doing?" she asked. I smiled. "Just improving my landscaping." She squinted, as if trying to read between the lines. "You know the HOA will need to review any significant changes." "Of course," I said. "I'm well within my rights. Trust me, I checked." Karen didn't smile back. Her eyes narrowed as the first shovel hit the earth. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just lost the opening move. The game was on. The digging began slowly, deliberately, almost like a whisper. A rented backhoe rolled into my backyard one foggy morning, its engine purring with quiet defiance. I stood beside the operator, sipping my coffee like any normal homeowner overseeing a landscaping project. Except this wasn't landscaping. This was revolution. Karen didn't show up right away, which surprised me. I figured the sound of machinery would summon her like a bat signal of non-compliance. But hours passed without a single glimpse of her clipboard. By late afternoon, a shallow trench traced the perimeter of my backyard. And still, nothing. I almost felt disappointed. But Karen never misses a disturbance for long. Just as the sun dipped low, casting dramatic shadows across the freshly torn earth, she appeared at the edge of my lawn, arms crossed, mouth set in a line tight enough to hold back a tsunami. She didn't speak at first. She just stared at the trench like she could will it to fill itself back in. Finally, she said, "That looks suspiciously like a pool." I smiled as politely as I could. "Oh no, Karen, it's not a pool. It's a water feature." She blinked. "A water feature?" "Yes, decorative landscaping, perfectly within HOA guidelines, subsection 12, paragraph C. You know, the one about ornamental installations that promote tranquility." Her jaw tightened. I could see her mentally flipping through her mental filing cabinet, trying to recall the precise wording. But I had her. I had studied the rules more closely than she ever had. She left without another word, her shoes crunching angrily on the gravel like tiny declarations of war. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the project with a level of focus usually reserved for bomb disposal experts and people diffusing Thanksgiving family drama. I hired my old college roommate who now worked in landscape design. He loved the challenge. We sat under string lights late into the night, sketching out blueprints that looked more like fantasy novel maps than backyard plans. Drawbridges, lily pads, subtle uplighting, a filtration system disguised as a rock formation, the pièce de résistance, a koi fish sanctuary with hand-picked specimens named after every member of the HOA board. Neighbors walked by slowly now, pretending not to gawk. One brave soul whispered, Are you really building a moat? Of course not, I replied with a wink. Karen would never allow that. The trench deepened. Waterproof lining was installed. Stones were arranged with obsessive care. And when the pump started humming and water poured in for the first time, it was like a spell had been cast. My house didn't look rebellious. It looked majestic, serene, like it had been plucked from a Scottish countryside and dropped into suburban monotony just to mock it. Karen returned the next day, of course. She stared across the now-filling trench and said, "This isn't over." "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "It's just beginning." The morning the excavators arrived for phase 2, I made pancakes. There was something poetic about standing in my kitchen, flipping golden batter, while outside, machinery roared and churned the earth like a battlefield. From my window, I could see the workers carefully reinforcing the banks of the trench. They'd taken to calling it the moat, even though I'd never once used that word aloud. It was becoming a thing of beauty, symmetrical, serene, and maddeningly unclassifiable. Karen, of course, didn't see it that way. By noon, she was back, standing at the property line like she was holding vigil for lost order. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. She just narrowed her eyes and leaned over the fence like she expected to find me committing a crime in real time. I walked out with a lemonade in hand and a relaxed grin. "Just curious," she said, skipping pleasantries. "How deep is that trench?" "About 3 feet," I answered cheerfully. "Shallow enough to be safe, deep enough for koi to thrive." She scribbled something on a pad. "What about fencing?" "Children could fall in." "There'll be a decorative bridge," I explained, gesturing to the blueprint on my tablet. "And motion lights for safety, all within code." Karen looked like she'd bitten into something sour. "And you're saying this isn't a recreational pool?" "Nope, just water, for looking at, very peaceful." She studied me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve, then turned sharply and left, her footsteps stiff and decisive. I watched her go, then turned to the crew. "Let's add some lily pads." The next few days were a blur of productive chaos. We carved out the foundation for the drawbridge, a simple wooden walkway that would lift with a pulley system when I didn't want company. Solar-powered lanterns were planted along the edges, casting gentle reflections on the surface. Water began to settle into the trench, and with it, a strange calm seemed to settle over me too. The more beautiful it became, the more absurd it felt that it had started from something so petty. But that was the magic of spite. It turns irritation into art. Karen, meanwhile, escalated. She called an emergency HOA meeting, dragging the board members into a tense Tuesday evening gathering in her living room. I wasn't invited, but word got back to me. She'd tried to introduce an amendment. No medieval or fortress-like installations. It didn't pass. Too vague, someone said. Too reactionary. One board member even joked, "What's next, banning bird baths?" When I received the official notice from the HOA, no violations detected, I framed it and hung it in the guest bathroom. Karen was losing control, and she knew it. But she wouldn't go down without a fight. That evening, I lit the lanterns, stood on my drawbridge, and watched the koi fish circle in lazy, elegant patterns. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear Karen's door slam shut. The moat glimmered under the moonlight. Suburbia had never looked so regal. Karen's silence didn't last. For 3 whole days, there was nothing but suspicious peace. The kind of calm you feel before a thunderstorm rearranges your backyard furniture. I knew she was planning something. Karen never let defeat sit quietly. She was the kind of woman who believed rules were living things that could evolve in her favor, with enough bullet points and bolded phrases. And sure enough, on day 4, I found the first salvo in my mailbox, a violation notice for decorative hostility. I didn't know what that meant until I looked closer. Apparently, My dragon statue, perched at the edge of the moat, blowing mist from its nostrils twice an hour, was deemed intimidating and disruptive to the emotional comfort of nearby residents. I almost framed that too. Instead, I printed out a scientific article about the calming effect of misting fountains and mailed it to the HOA office with a handwritten note. Emotional discomfort is subjective. Science is not. But Karen wasn't finished. She filed noise complaints about frogs, mind you, that had taken to lounging near the water feature. She claimed their croaking after 7 p.m. was a breach of quiet enjoyment. I suggested she file a restraining order against nature. Then came the flyer. She slipped one under every door in the neighborhood, a call to action to update the HOA charter to include restrictions on medieval-themed landscaping, aquatic barriers, and adversarial ornamentation. She stopped just short of saying my name, but everyone knew. The board wasn't impressed. One member called me privately and admitted the entire debacle had become weirdly entertaining. Another said Karen's proposal read like something from a Renaissance Fair policy manual. The amendment didn't even make it to vote. Karen had officially crossed into satire. But she wasn't deterred. She started taking photos, close-ups of algae, of koi fish she claimed were too large to be ornamental, of my bridge in both raised and lowered positions, as if it were part of some secret military defense system. She paced my property like a prison warden, stopping at odd hours just to jot down notes or glare at me through binoculars from across the street. It was almost flattering. I responded in kind. I added little upgrades every week. A hand-carved wooden sign that said "Moat, Sweet Moat." Subtle speakers that played the sounds of lapping water and harp music. I even installed a motion sensor light, shaped like a torch, that flickered softly whenever someone passed too close. Every detail was legal. Every addition was a performance. Then came the reporters. Somehow a local blog picked up the story. Suburban man installs moat to outsmart HOA tyrant, and it went viral. By the next week, camera crews showed up at my door. I gave interviews from the drawbridge. I posed with the koi. I made sure to thank community leaders who respected creativity and legal landscaping. Karen's name was never mentioned, but her fury was loud enough to shake windows. She'd tried to crush me with rules. Now, she was being outmaneuvered with finesse. The moat had become a monument, not just to stubbornness, but to victory. It was only a matter of time before the moat became more than a statement. It became an event. It started with a joke, a neighbor tossing out the idea of a castle-themed cookout while admiring the lantern reflections in the water one evening. I laughed. Then I thought about it. Then I rented a fog machine. The invitations were parchment-style scrolls, sealed with wax and delivered via miniature plastic sword, stabbed into each neighbor's front lawn. The RSVP was optional, but everyone came anyway. Curiosity had been simmering in the cul-de-sac for weeks, and the promise of smoked turkey legs, mulled cider and drawbridge selfies proved irresistible. Even the Thompsons, who hadn't spoken to anyone since the sprinkler pressure feud of 2018, showed up in full-night regalia. By 5 o'clock, the backyard had transformed into something that would make a Renaissance fair blush. Tents with velvet drapes, hay bales for seating, string lights casting golden halos on the water, and a large inflatable dragon floating smugly in the center of the moat. Children ran around in tunics. Adults sipped wine from pewter mugs. Someone brought a lute. I didn't ask questions. Karen arrived precisely 38 minutes in, not in costume, not smiling. She stood on the sidewalk just outside the property line, arms folded, her expression a potent cocktail of outrage and disbelief. I waved from the bridge. She didn't wave back. I saw her pull out her phone, saw her dial, saw her pacing. The police arrived shortly after, summoned by a noise complaint and some vague statement about unauthorized gatherings involving aquatic hazards. They parked quietly, stepping out with amused expressions, as they surveyed the scene. One officer nudged his partner and said, "Looks like a moat party." Karen intercepted them before they could reach the bridge. She gestured wildly, pointing at the torches, the fog, the costumed guests. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught snippets. Nuisance, safety risk, possible zoning violation involving turrets. Then the officers crossed the drawbridge. I met them halfway, offering a turkey leg and a mug of cider. They chuckled, asked to see my permits. I handed over a folder so well organized it could have passed for a congressional report. After a brief inspection and a polite chat, they gave me a thumbs up. No violations, no issues. Just one request. Can we take a picture with the dragon? Karen watched all of it unfold like someone had thrown glitter in her eyes. Her final move was a dramatic exit, stomping away with the stiffness of a cartoon villain denied her closing monologue. She didn't even take a turkey leg. The party raged on well into the evening. Someone brought sparklers. Someone else brought a karaoke machine. The dragon glowed softly as laughter echoed off the water. And me? I stood in the center of it all, 1 foot on my perfectly legal drawbridge, watching suburbia transform into a legend. Karen had tried to shut it all down, but in doing so, she gave it more life than I ever could. Karen's fall wasn't dramatic. It was slow, sour, and inevitable, like milk left on a porch in August. After the Moat party made its rounds on local news and social media, the neighborhood began to shift. People who had once cowered under her clipboard tyranny started to find their voices. One neighbor trimmed his hedges into topiary dinosaurs. Another painted her front door eggplant purple. Even Mr. Martinez, the retired dentist known for watering his lawn in total silence, began setting out lawn gnomes wearing chainmail. The tipping point came at the monthly HOA meeting. Karen, visibly fraying around the edges, opened with a motion to create an Architectural Uniformity Enforcement Subcommittee. No one seconded it. She tried to introduce a fine schedule for ornamental excess. No one moved. Then a hand rose from the back. Mrs. Wexler, who had never spoken more than a polite hello in 5 years. "I'd like to motion for a vote," she said, "to elect a new HOA president." Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Silence fell over the room like a dropped curtain. The vote wasn't even close. She stepped down with the grace of a cat forced into a bathtub, her exit marked only by the slow crumpling of her rulebook and a hard sigh that echoed through the folding chairs. The new president was Gary. Mid-30s, IT guy, wore sandals to meetings and once hosted a garage concert. His first act in office was to dissolve 3 committees and declare an Aesthetic Liberation Month. He also gave me a gift basket with koi food and a sticker that read, "Legal, not sorry." The Moat, now affectionately dubbed the Sanctuary by local bloggers, became the pride of the block. Families came by to feed the koi. Kids would drop paper boats in the water and cheer as they floated lazily past the dragon statue. Couples sat on the bridge at sunset, legs dangling, whispering about how good it felt to breathe again. Karen still lived on the street. That part didn't change. But she changed. Slowly, reluctantly. Her daily walks became less frequent. Her clipboard disappeared. She trimmed her own hedges instead of sending anonymous citations. And while she never apologized, she did nod once when I passed her at the mailbox. It was the kind of nod that says, "You win." But I'm pretending I don't care. I didn't need her to care. The victory wasn't about crushing Karen. It was about building something that couldn't be crushed. My moat had started as a loophole, a petty rebellion. But it became a reminder that even the most rigid systems have cracks, and all you need is a little water, a lot of patience, and a few koi to widen them. One night, as I stood at the edge of the moat with a drink in hand, I watched the lanterns flicker and the fish swirl beneath the surface. The air was quiet, the kind of peace that comes not from rules, but from freedom. I took a sip and smiled. Long live the moat.